All right, well, the world of academic publication is not all rosy and has a dark side, or actually a number of dark sides, I'd say. But one that has kind of crept up more prevalently in the last number of years is is the whole phenomenon of predatory journals. And we're going to talk about what that is in this course and in this video, and why it's important for you to avoid it. Um, Also, how you can detect when you come across a predatory journal, and you probably will. There are a number of studies that have come out about predatory publishing, and a few of those will be online. But just a quick word about that, and I want to kind of recap a couple of points that have been made in this course before about how when you're an inexperienced researcher, especially, you want your voice to be heard. There are also, in many contexts in the world, these pressures for students, grad students, to publish. You obviously, there's a currency associated with publication, so you want that on your CV, and so there are these enormous internal and external pressures involved in the publication process. And therefore, people can be particularly vulnerable if they're in that situation of being an early career researcher, and it kind of is reminiscent to me, the whole morass of predatory publishing and how it's grown is reminiscent to me of vanity publishing, and also I would say even the fashion industry, where it's easy for a pseudo modeling agency, for example, to approach someone and prey on their vanities and say, well, we can get you, we can make you a star. You've got the look. Come and we'll take some shots, put together a portfolio, and you'll be on your way. When in fact their only interest is in making money off of you, and they know that they can easily do that. The same thing with some cosmetic surgeries. I think obviously there are some cosmetic surgeries that are really important, but there are some cosmetic surgeons that they know they can easily prey on people's vanities and say, well, you've got this defect here. I can make you look like your favorite movie star if you just do this or that. And then all of a sudden people will buy into that because they're particularly vulnerable. And I would say that researchers, for different reasons, even more experienced researchers, because of the pressures they feel, can easily fall prey to predatory journals. And so it's a real shame. It's really actually kind of disgusting how much money they make off of these people's vulnerable positions. And so I encourage you to be aware of that. And this is a typical thing that you might see in your email one day. So an invitation to submit your paper, and you even see this for conferences, but this is and I receive, I think it's every other day, an invitation like this. All right, and we'll talk about why immediately this should send up red flags. I received this invitation, again, one of many I've received before. And if you are not that familiar with the world of publication, just looking at this title here might just say, okay, well, this looks like a legitimate journal, international journal of language and linguistics. And you see that there's an ISSN for both print and online. And so you say, well, great, it would count as a publication. And it might. But look at the body of the email. And there are a couple of things here that might set you off. And first of all, if you look at the format of the greeting, it's sort of as if they just kind of took an Excel file and uploaded it onto a mass email service because they put my last name first and first initial. And then there's something kind of odd about saying greetings um, in that genre of a message, and then the English is a bit funny here. So we are writing to show our deepest impression on your previous article. It's a very sort of poetic way of expressing interest in one's work, and then it's just sort of funny capitalization there, and uh, anyway, the whole thing looks very suspicious. At least it did to me, and it should to you. So to recap, although the journal title may look legitimate enough and that there's an ISSN and all that, things like when you see something like this, express publication or fast publication, publication is 70 days, especially in a field like mine, uh, in the discipline of applied linguistics, where I know good journals can take upwards of a year to get through the whole pipeline. Publication in 70 days should set off all kinds of alarms. Then some odd wordings here and there should also set off alarms. And it's not just one thing um, that sets up that throws up those red flags. It's the aggregate. Another thing that should set off alarm bells is just the very fact that you're receiving an invitation. If you think about it, the flagship journals, the top tier journals of your discipline, usually don't pursue authors. You know, if you are a scientist, you're not going to receive an invitation usually from the journal Science or the journal Nature because they have thousands of people knocking on their doors. They don't need to go after anybody unless they're looking for a particular kind of contribution, um, which is rare, relatively speaking. Maybe an editorial, they might do that, but certainly not for novel research. Again, that's, whatever the top tier, um, most respected journal is in your particular discipline, that journal is most likely receiving so many queries that they don't need to go after anybody. So if you receive an invitation, that in itself um, should should be a red flag. And just the nature of what they say here, I mean, again, you have some odd wording here, like cutting edge researches, where the pluralization of research is not a commonly accepted form. In view of the novelty, advance, and possible extensive use of your research results, we invite you to send other unpublished works of related fields to the journal. So not only did they ask me about a specific study which had been presented at a conference, which is clearly where they found my name, but they're saying, and anything else you've got, just throw it in there and we'll publish it for you. Also, inviting me to be a board member is also a bit odd. And if you look at the main page of this journal, some other signs that could kind of would kind of give you an indication that you have to be careful. Where it's indexed, if you look always look where a journal is indexed, and all of these indexers here are not ones that I use. So, I look at Web of Science, or I look at Scopus, um, and these here, this one here, I've never heard of, this Polish one here, or universal impact factor. These are, to me, they're not familiar to me. And so when I see something like this, a beta version of a Polish indexer, and it kind of sticks out as, okay, well, that may be fine, but where are the other ones that I'm more familiar with? Compare it with the Journal of English Academic Purposes, which is the article that I referred to in the previous video, talking about plagiarism. That journal I'm familiar with. I cite that journal. I read that journal. And if I look at the indexing of that journal, I see many more names that are familiar to me: MLA and Scopus and SSCI. So those databases, they're familiar to me, so I know that it's a clear sign that it's legitimate, and beyond the sign that I actually read the journal and cite from that journal myself. And so, look out for the indexing. And there are a couple other things. I mean, if you look at the editorial board, and the editorial board is uh, missing an editor-in-chief in this case. But if you look at the board and you see that there are 124 editors in this case, and that there is no editor-in-chief, and if you look at the people on the editorial board and they don't look, they're not names that are familiar to you, all of that together. So again, it's the aggregate. If you look at all of those things, the odd wording, the indexing, uh, and the editorial board, all of those things together, they should set you off. But why is all this important? Well, as I mentioned, many academics are doing this, and they're eager to publish in these journals. You might ask yourself, well, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Well, a lot of bad things can happen. Beyond the fact that you, they're going to ask you to pay, in all cases, money to publish in their journal. I mean, they're not inviting you because they love science. They're inviting you to publish because they make you pay money. And what they do, as I mentioned earlier, they prey on people's vanities and vulnerabilities. They'll get you hooked in, where they invite you to submit something. They don't talk about how much they're going to charge. They take you through this kind of perfunctory process of review, which will be worthless. And then after you've invested time and that you've essentially wasted going through this review process, and they've told you that they love your work, then they'll say, okay, right, all you have to do now is pay this publication fee, and then you're done. Well, there are article publication charges associated with some journals, and that's not, paying in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, for depending on your discipline and the journal that you're publishing in. That can be a normal practice. But if you're paying for a journal that's basically not ever going to highlight your work, where it's in fact can diminish the value of your work, and clearly that's just a waste of money. And so there is this trend of academics publishing more and more, and this because there is increasing pressure to publish. And there's an interesting thing that happened. This is reported in the New York Times a few years back. That recently a group of researchers invented a fake academic, Anna Zust. The name in Polish means fraudster. Dr. Zust applied to legitimate and predatory journals asking to be an editor. She supplied a resume in which her publications and degrees were total fabrications, as were the names of the publishers of the books she said she had contributed to. The legitimate journals rejected her application immediately, which is what you would expect. But 48 out of 360 questionable journals made her an editor. Made her an editor. 4 made her an editor-in-chief. One journal sent her an email saying, "It's our pleasure to add your name as our editor-in-chief for the journal with no responsibilities. Just have your name there." So somewhere there's a journal with an editor-in-chief named Dr. Seuss. And there you go. And so if you publish in a journal like this, the one I showed you earlier, not only will you be wasting money, but because the indexing in most cases, uh, are the indexing services associated with these journals are basically worthless. It means that when you publish um, in one of these journals, it means that yes, you can count it as a publication, but nobody will ever find you. And and the whole purpose of you publishing, obviously, is for you to make a contribution to a conversation that you want to be recognized in. You want your voice to be heard. And I can tell you this from personal experience. In must have been about 2008, around there, I was invited to publish with a researcher that I highly respected. He passed a few years back, and uh, to research with this person was quite an honor. And he had received an invitation from a journal, from a journal in a country in Europe. I won't say the name. And it was and the journal was a new journal, and they said, well, you know, we're a new journal, and we like you, this famous researcher I'm referring to, and we want you to publish, and which would seem like a legitimate and believable thing because he had such a name that to receive such an invitation isn't that odd. He had received many such invitations, and since he was under the gun with the funding body that had paid for the research in Europe. And one of the promised outputs of the research was, as is often the case, a journal article. He said, "Well, this is great. I've got this invitation. I've got to publish articles. So, hey, Ron, why don't you take the lead on this article, and and then it's a sure publication because they want me to do it." And I said, "Great." So I did. I spent, a long time conducting the research, a long time writing the article, months, and those months were just wasted because the article does exist today. If I really, really look hard for it, um, I don't even list it on my CV. This article, it's a shame because it's it's in a journal that doesn't seem to exist anymore and was never indexed in any of the indexing services that I use. I didn't at the time. I wasn't aware, as I am today, of these predatory journals, and so it's just lost. It's in a black hole of publication. That black hole that is created by um, and inhabited by um, these predatory journals and all the articles that they publish. And so please, please do be careful. Um, and nowadays, that goes not only for the things that you write, but even for conferences you present in. So please do be careful. Don't let your voice get lost, and don't let your valuable time get wasted and your money.